And
And we're
welcome.
live.
Oh, yeah, and we're live. And welcome to The Outsiders. It is live. Of course, if you're not watching this live, you're on our YouTube page, The Outsiders MMA Show. We appreciate that. Subscribe and check the little notification button there. It should let you know whenever we do these shows. But we are doing it live on YouTube and Periscope. I am Josh Gross, joined as always by Jeff Sherwood. We are the MMA Outsiders. Jeff, what's up, my man? How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Doing
Doing
all
all
right.
right. A little tired, a little hot, worn down. The Central Valley summers. But I'm happy, and we haven't even had a chance to talk about it. For the time being, I mean, it was a great week for Dodger fans. I mean, we signed Mookie Betts,
Right.
and baseball started.
Well, baseball started, but is it going to be finished? I mean,
I don't know.
they already kicked the Marlins out, basically.
Something had to happen. Come on.
Something.
If the Marlins have 17 people with coronavirus, they all went to a strip club or something one night or something. Because all these other teams aren't getting a ton of them. Obviously, when you're testing all the time, it's just like, it's just like where I work. We test now once I just had my second test, so there's positive test. I mean, there's going to be that. For so long there was there wasn't a whole lot of positives around or anything, but nobody was getting tested. So now everyone's getting tested regularly, and a lot more people are getting it. And I'm just wondering about these sports, what's going to happen. I hope that it hangs on. And I mean, 60 games are going to go by quick, and every game is so important.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's crazy. I'm just going to enjoy it while it lasts.
Well, that's the question. I think the bubbles, and like we've had a lot of discussion about bubbles in mixed martial arts, obviously with what the UFC's done. Now with what Bellator is attempting in Connecticut, they had their first show on Friday. I think there's a huge difference between the bubble, especially like with an individual sport like combat sports, but then you're seeing the bubble like with the MLS, right? In Orlando, and the bubble with the NBA in Orlando. And then you have what Major League Baseball is doing, which is like, we're going to actually have teams travel and go to different markets and play in their own stadiums. That's a degree of danger, I think, that they're really asking for, and it may risk the season. But, teams are figuring this out. Leagues are figuring this out. And there's no question that the UFC has figured it out. The last of 4 Fight Island cards, Jeff, was over the weekend. Darren Till loses to Robert Whitaker. Lots of good fights on the undercard. What's Fight, like at least the first chapter in Fight Island history here is wrapped up. Do you have a favorite Fight Island memory so far, Jeff? I've had 4 of these cards. What's your memory?
Well, I mean, obviously what happened, latest kind of sticks to us, but there was a lot of questions about Robert Whitaker. He fought Yoel Romero for 10 rounds, and they were wars, and he had other wars, and he admitted he was kind of burned out. So you kind of wondered, like, there was a lot of question marks coming into that fight. And he kind of proved us wrong. He got hit on the button a few times and seemed to take it well. So Darren Till is no slouch. So, I'm glad to see him back. I definitely think that, that makes the division that much better with him, good, I mean, because there was a lot of question marks. I noticed before the fight that Werdum was a huge underdog, especially to get a submission.
Yeah.
And I know it was hard to kind of like go there because his last fight looked so bad. But man, I mean, if I was a hardcore gambler again, right, that is definitely something that I would have jumped on. Now I tend to try and not look at things like that from a betting standpoint, because I don't want to, start gambling a bunch again.
Temptation Island, Jeff Sherwood. Stay away from Temptation Island.
That was actually a real show that I liked.
I know it was. That's what I'm saying. I'm just trying to speak your language and stay away.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah. But lots of good things. It's working, right? The UFC is making it work. So
they have four shows here, right? 4 shows, starting with UFC 251 from July 12th to just a couple days ago. I mean, they put together a stretch. That card had a lot of stories, obviously major stories, things that will push the narrative around the UFC for the next few months. Then they had Calvin Kattar and Dan Ige, the main event there. The next card, the Wednesday card. Again, just I think the fights and the talent and sort of the overall package of the UFC was shown in its strength. Then they went to the 125-pound title fight card, headlined by Deiveson Figueiredo and Joseph Benavidez. Jack Hermanson and Kelvin Gastelum was on that card. Lots of memories there. And then we have the Whitaker-Till card. Of the whole package, is there a fighter that stands out to you as like the one who really kind of made a name for himself or herself, or a moment that like flashes into your mind? Say, wow, that was, that's how I'm going to remember those 4 events out there in Abu Dhabi.
Well, there's a lot of them actually. I mean, Usman coming out and performing again. He just has to break into that stardom, and we'll see. That was a good fight. Robert Whitaker returning, Figueiredo manhandling Benavidez, Calvin Kattar. I mean, like he obviously seems like the real deal. The Gastelum fight, I was a little disappointed, but that's what happens. But yeah, I don't know. I guess there's a new hot person out there that everyone's talking about, right?
We'll get to yes, we will get to him. Khamzat Chimaev. I think we'll talk to him about him in a second. There's lots of memories from the 4 weeks, and then there were some things that really stood out this weekend. A confrontation between Dan Hardy and Herb Dean. Look, we've been around. I think Herb and you and I have probably seen more Herb Dean fights than just about anybody. Although he's certainly done a lot of fights, I think, that you and I have not seen in different parts of the world. But Herb, from the very beginning of his refereeing career, I think had a reputation as someone who could be in certain stages indecisive. There were moments that he was not at all that I think stood out as great moments for Herb Dean. All of us remember the Tim Sylvia Frank Mir decision, his moment to sort of intervene in that fight in that particular moment may have saved Tim Sylvia's career, right? And so there have been those, but then there's been the times where it just seems like he's slow to react and fighters will take some punishment maybe in a situation that they shouldn't have. And Dan Hardy really took an issue with him. They went back and forth in the arena, Jeff, and then on social media, both of them explaining their sides, talking about it. 2 things for you. This confrontation between like a commentator and an official in the arena live, is that in your mind appropriate? And I'll have some thoughts on that as well. And 2, who was right in this? Did Herb Dean screw up? Was Dan Hardy correct because a fighter was endangered? How'd you see that?
I think there's a fine line. Now, I'll start by saying, do I think Dan Hardy was wrong? Not necessarily. But was he wrong for confronting Herb Dean? I think yes. In that situation, you're a commentator. I get it. It's in Dan Hardy's blood, though. I mean, he's definitely one of those guys that cares about fighters. He's been in there. He knows what it's like. But you just can't have commentators going after people. I mean, could you imagine, a totally different aspect because they're not right there cage side. But I mean, could you imagine, a commentator from any of the big sports, walking down to the sidelines and start yelling at the referee? Like, nobody's going to go for that. He would be gone. It doesn't matter who he is. There's just things you got to do. But, I don't totally blame Dan Hardy. I think it was a point where Herb got a little comfortable and things can happen so fast, and he just got caught on the wrong side of the on the wrong side of the cage. He was a long ways away from the fighters. But if that doesn't happen in that
after
moment,
the knockdown from Trinaldo, you're saying when
yes,
he was checked out like this, you saying Herb was out of position and that's what took him so long?
well, when he first went down, you could see Herb was clear on the other side of the cage, and he did the 2-step and sprinted over there.
Right.
But then he still, he still let the fight carry on. We don't know. I remember talking to Big John McCarthy about this because we can't see eyes, right? Even if we're there, cage side, watching on TV, a lot of times we can't see what their eyes look like. And there's been fights that Big John McCarthy stopped and all these other referees, and I've asked them about it, and they're like, dude, their eyes were rolling up in the back of their head. We can't see that. And maybe from Herb's perspective, he thought that, he was okay. It's a judgment call. Me personally, I always would rather have a fight stopped early than late. That's just the way I am. With that being said, I thought he took a few punches that he shouldn't have. When you basically curl up in a fetal position and just cover your face, that's not intelligently defending yourself. That's basically telling the referee, I want out,
right?
But I'm not going to tap.
Yeah, that's usually a pretty clear sign that your sole interest is protecting yourself and you're done with the fight. Interesting commentary from Herb Dean afterwards, sort of defending his position.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think he raised some, what I would say, you can take issue with his in the moment decision to let that fight continue. But then also, I think there were some thoughts afterwards that a lot of people wouldn't have considered. Hearing stop the fight in that kind of scenario come from outside the cage can be distracting because you're not sure exactly where it's coming from. And there are people who are, sort of designated as it's okay to hear that from. And so, I think Dan Hardy let the emotion of the moment, and sometimes the announcers, Paul Felder, they'll let the emotion. But these guys are not professional journalists. And, a guy like Tony Romo, for instance, who's taken off the competitor hat. Dan Hardy doesn't compete anymore. He would if he could. Paul Felder certainly competes. Sometimes you have him and sometimes you don't. And just because you're still an active competitor doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be biased in a way. But the fact is the UFC pays these people. It's not an independent broadcast. You're not expecting journalism. So when Dan Hardy pops up and sort of yells at Herb Dean, I'm not seeing a professional journalist do that and taking issue with their journalism in that moment, the inappropriateness of that. I take issue if I do, because just sort of know your role. That's not your responsibility. And have a little bit more control. Dan Hardy was always a calculated, smart, controlled fighter. Take some of that into your announcing. You don't need to be so over the top. Interesting moment. But then I also said this on Twitter, Jeff. I was like, what's the problem with Dan Hardy doing that or Paul Felder doing that in the post-fight broadcast when Dana White will go into a press conference and absolutely crap all over an official or a judge? Mm-hmm. So there's no consistent, no consistent UFC message on that. You get that from the top in the UFC. Why wouldn't you expect that to spill out on a broadcast?
Right. And I'm not surprised. I mean, we've known when they put guys like this in the booth that it is what it is. These things are going to happen. Active fighters and there's some great guys. I mean, I love Cruz inside the booth. He's so smooth. I love to watch a fight with Dominic Cruz commentating. But this is just another thing that the UFC or MMA hasn't necessarily gotten to, where they can do basically whatever they want. They'll put in the booth whoever they want, and it doesn't matter. Active fighters, they could be commentating on somebody that they've trained with for years, and they're still active. So there's a fine line there, but the UFC does it. And, we're still, even though we think that we've been watching MMA forever and it's been a sport forever, it really hasn't. I mean, it's still a baby. And I think these are just things that will iron out as the years go on.
Yeah.
As it becomes, I mean, how many things have we seen evolve? A
lot.
I mean,
Yeah,
I used to manage fighters, so it was like conflicts of interest everywhere, and there still are some.
Right.
We have an active fighter that manages fighters.
Yeah, well, yeah, Danny guy. I don't know if that's a conflict or not, but yeah, there have been shifts. There are still lots of conflicts throughout the sport. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
But these kinds of stories will often overshadow the conversation around the fights, and a lot of people were hoping that the Darren Till, Robert Whitaker would be like the thing that sort of capped the entire Fight Island 4-event run, and it was a good fight. It wasn't a great fight. I saw, like you mentioned earlier, Whitaker sort of seemed to like have a little bit of rust, trying to get his focus back, get his movement back. He tried to mix up his mixed martial arts, because when he's doing that, he's really at his best, winging a lot of shots, throwing a lot of haymakers, things that Darren Till saw coming a mile away. I thought Till stood up, put on a good performance, was a serious competitor, wanted to do that. But I saw that Whitaker needed a little bit more. He needs a little bit more before he's going to get back to that top of the weight class, I think, and getting some of that rust off will do him really good. There was a lot of stuff up and down this card, Jeff, that I think people paid attention to, including, as you referenced, Khamzat Chimaev, who fought twice in 11 days. I think was hit once total and outlanded his opponents like 45,000 to 1. So the talk around I love it, because there's always this talk, and Dana's right. Dana White is correct when he says that the people who wonder about and freak about where's the next stars coming from, they always come. In the UFC formula, they come inside of that formula, inside of that ecosystem, and soon enough, a guy who no one knew who he was, this Chechen fighter out of Sweden, very few people knew his name. All of a sudden now they're talking about like, oh my God, he could be champion in this weight class, including Dana White talking about maybe he's ready for Kamaru Usman. Impressed what I saw from him, 185, 170. Amazing he could make weight like that, dominated. There are huge levels in terms of the type of opponent that he faced so far and where he's got to get to be at the top of the division. So let's not leapfrog. Can we get like to the next stage and sort of see him do it? He said he wants to fight in August sometime. The people who say that this guy is like the guy, the second coming, the Khabib 2.0, Jeff. You see that out of him? Is he Khabib 2.0?
I don't know. I mean, I think it would be harder to find somebody that actually knew one of the fighters that he's beaten. Like, and like you said, there's levels. Let's not forget that Rhys McKee was the biggest underdog on the card that night. So he was supposed to beat him up.
Look at you looking at the odds. You're always looking at the odds, Jeff. Who are you fooling?
I think I saw that a tweet somewhere. I don't think I was looking, but
clearly was a big underdog, exactly. And then stylistically, this guy obviously can wrestle. Obviously has dominant top game. Reminded me, honestly, of a younger Diego Sanchez, guys who will take down, maul, take dominant position, maul, and if there's a submission, that they'll take it. That's to me, and I was actually talking about this kind of recently, ground and pound, right? That submission, grappling, ground and pound kind of catch wrestling style is the purest, best way to win mixed martial arts fights. Safest way to do it. You don't get hit and you dominate people. And that's what this guy seems to have. Like to see him increase the competition. We'll get there soon, but a lot to like of what he saw. Anyone else on this card jump out to you, Jeff? There was a couple new faces I thought that deserved to mention.
Well, one thing I was going to say, I think he has a little more power than Diego. I mean, his ground and pound when he had his opponent grounded. I mean, those shots were brutal. Right. Diego used to be really good at it, but you didn't get that sound that you were getting. So
I don't know. Some of his early King of the Cage fights, I remember hearing some pretty good thuds, but he's not naturally as big as this guy. There's no question.
Right. Yeah. Right. Paul Craig, I always enjoy watching Paul Craig fight.
Well, that was a nice triangle there.
Yes, that was good. And it was nice to see Werdum come back and get the win and actually show some emotion.
Right.
I like when fighters show emotion. There's nothing worse than I hate seeing a fighter lose and act like they don't care.
Yeah.
Because that definitely puts doubt, in my mind, if they're ever going to rise up again, or they're just going to, fade away into the sunset. We can't really say Francisco Trinaldo is he's what, 41 now.
So far, you've not said one new face, but keep going. Keep
well, to be honest with you, I only watched the main card.
Okay.
So, but and something that you will be proud of, I did watch the main event of Bellator.
Oh, great! I'm so proud.
Yeah. But other than that, yeah, watch some highlights and stuff. So, I did watch the Tanner Boser fight. He seems like, maybe with some work and some fights that maybe he could do something. I think right now, if he gets, if he gets matched up against somebody in the top 15, top 10, he probably gets beat, but you never know.
He looks like a good enough athlete where I think he can give some guys some problems. But yeah, that was a nice performance from him. I thought if you haven't seen the fights on the undercard, Jeff, check out Tom Aspinall's fight, another heavyweight. Took on Jake Collier, really someone who didn't look like they kind of belonged in that spot. All being fair to Jake Collier. Some may say unfair, but it certainly seemed that way. But Aspinall looked like he's smooth and talented and a good athlete. And more than that, very just calm in the moment that he stepped in and won by pretty nice stoppage there in 45 seconds. It was a good card. Again, it was another one of these showcases of the UFC's international talent. And we didn't mention it so far. You mentioned Verdum, but you didn't mention the other side, Alexander Gustafsson. I saw that and I said that, it was kind of a case of Verdum muscling him. And in some ways, the way that he just had no regard on the takedown, the sweep, kind of like doing it sloppily, sort of just muscling his way through and then taking the back. I thought the back take especially was sort of a muscly sort of back take that a bigger guy can do in a smaller guy.
Right.
Even though Gustafsson weighed 240 and, same height, he's not a natural heavyweight. It's a different thing. And Verdum's grappling and ability, I think, really presented problems for him. But what does Gustafsson do here? He's not a heavyweight. Does he have the motivation, the interest of getting to 205? Do you want to see him try and do it?
It doesn't seem like it with his retirement, but, I felt Gustafsson had an advantage fighting at 205 because of his length and, being as tall as he is. And then you go up to heavyweight and you just throw all that out. And that was a perfect example, that we saw there. But who knows? Who knows what he wants to do? After losing like that, he's probably a little angry. So maybe he will decide to come back and go down to 205 and beat some guys up, because I think there's a lot of guys in that division that he could probably beat up.
Could be. So that was the Fight Island. The UFC now moves on to Vegas. No rest for the UFC weary, and really, honestly, like they've done a tremendous job week in, week out. I think right there with the PGA Tour and with NASCAR in terms of promoting big events one after another. Fans know exactly what they're getting. UFC Apex, it's another interesting night of fights. I think the main event's Derek Brunson against Edmund Shabazian, and Edmund's getting a lot of love, managed by Ronda Rousey. But even if that connection didn't exist, he's a Glendale guy. By the way, do you know I was born in Glendale, Jeff?
No, I did not know that.
Hospital in Glendale. Yes, I was. So,
wow.
Yeah, you can call me the Glendale kid, right? I think no.
I thought you were born in the 90210.
Never. It was not me. Glendale, California. And Edmund and the crew there is Glendale. Of course, Rousey was training in Glendale for a long time. He's, again, another one of these young, talented studs who grew up around seeing Rousey at the height. And so that kind of fame and like intense interest probably shouldn't spook the kid. And he looks like a finisher, and he looks very dangerous. He should look good in this fight. I think a lot of people are expecting him to win and then advance up that 185 ranks pretty quickly. What's your thought on that main event and the rest of that card?
Yeah, I think that now that he's kind of getting his feet wet. At first, when he came in and they're like he's managed by Ronda Rousey, I was kind of thinking, I don't know, is he for real? But I mean, obviously he's been around Glendale. He's trained with many, many tough guys. We know a lot of tough guys that have came out of that gym, and women. But this will definitely be the fight if he comes in and has a good performance against Brunson and gets the win. Brunson's a tough guy. He's been doing this for a long time, and he's had a lot of success. But he has had some fights where you see him fight and you're just like, where's Derek Brunson? So we'll see. Obviously, people love fighters that are undefeated, right? So
sure. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Edmund's undefeated.
Brunson,
so
right. Yeah, Brunson can show up. I was at this fight against Ian Heinzich in Anaheim.
Right.
And,
perfect example.
Yeah, he looked good that night and put on a good performance. And so back-to-back kind of good performances definitely needs to elevate his game to take out extremely confident. I mean, as you mentioned, the undefeated, but not all undefeateds are the same. Edmund, I think, highly confident, young undefeated fighter, and not so overconfident. I think that he's gotten himself in trouble. The rest of the card, some familiar names. We know these names: Joanne Calderwood, Jennifer Maia. Vicente Luque, always interesting, fun to watch against Randy Brown. That should be
a good fight. I love that fight.
Yeah, Lando Venata against Bobby Green, another seems like high action kind of fight. Kevin Holland against Trevin Giles. So you get the UFC matchmaking, high action fights. They love these kinds of fights, and it looks like that up and down the card. So that's it for the Apex. And then the UFC, Jeff, announced the big fight. Actually, Dana White reported on CNN. Khabib Nurmagomedov will defend. He'll return after the passing of his father. Will return to the cage on October 24th to take on Justin Gaethje. This is a hell of a fight. And I think there is real danger, as much danger as he has ever experienced for Khabib Nurmagomedov in this fight. Do you give Justin Gaethje not just a shot, but like a legitimate shot of being able to do what he wants to do in the fight? Because that's the thing. Dictate against Khabib is almost impossible. Nobody can dictate the fight against Khabib. But do you see Justin turning the tables, being able to do that, finding ways to not only stop Khabib's forward offense, takedowns, pressure, but turning it around and making Khabib react to him? Gaethje have that in him?
I think Khabib's going to be very smart about this fight. We see Khabib get hit against some other guys. I think he knows, and I think AKA knows that he's not going to be able to take a bunch of punches on the button from Gaethje. Nobody can. And I think that Khabib's going to come in and we're going to see a wrestling match. So I think it'll all be in Gaethje's corner, depending on how much he could fight off those takedowns, because Gaethje's a good wrestler himself, that could punch. But like you said, Khabib's just another level, and obviously Gaethje has a chance. Anybody that hits like Justin Gaethje has a chance to beat anybody on any given night. But I think Khabib and Hobbs stick to a smart game plan, and Khabib wrestles them and tires them out some, and just makes it a brutal fight, where Gaethje, gets frustrated. But I do say, I saw the early line, Justin Gaethje's plus 190. That's pretty.
Yeah, you've seen every line. So tell me again, what's the line?
Gaethje's plus 190.
Gaethje's plus 190. So what was Khabib minus
225?
225. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what the odds makers do with that. We have someone. Jeff, finish the sentence.
I should bet my house.
You're the one who needs to answer this question.
Man, that's a tough one. I I very rarely pick against Daniel Cormier, but I think this will be the fight that Stipe comes out and kind of proves, and people will kind of get off his back a little bit. I mean, how crazy was it that Stipe was taking a bunch of grief, at the beginning of the pandemic, saying he was scared to fight and all this stuff, where he's out there, saving lives and doing all these things as a first responder. Like, I don't think Stipe's scared of anything or anyone.
No, it's pretty stupid.
So, but you can never count out Daniel Cormier. I don't think I would bet the house on either of those guys, to be honest with you, because both those guys are two of the best heavyweights possibly ever, probably ever. And you don't want to bet the house on anything like that with two fighters that close in skill.
Well, of the three big fights we know now that are scheduled in the UFC, DC and Stipe, of course, Khabib now and Justin Gaethje, and also Adesanya against Santos. Which is the one that jumps out to you? It's almost an impossible question. Like, if you could only watch one, I think you'd have to sort of, to me, of the three, you shelve DC and Stipe. We've already seen that twice. Adesanya and Costa. Costa. Paulo Costa. Just has everything that you would want in a stylistic contest. You have that competitiveness. You have that zero in the loss column on the other side. You have a budding dominant champion who's extremely unique physically. And then you have Gaethje and Khabib, which should turn into just a battle of attrition, whoever wants it the most, and that's what you'd love to see. Of those three, is there one fight that you say, that above it, I have to watch that one? If I have to watch just one fight the rest of the year, this is going to be it.
For me, it would be Khabib and Gaethje. I love the Costa fight,
right?
And UFC is always trying to make stars, looking for new stars, and Costa could be that guy. I mean, if he goes out there and wins, like, that could push him to the next level.
Yeah. I always saw him as like a Vitor Belfort 3.0. That sort of has that look. If he can go out and keep winning, if he's dominant physically and finishes people, he's got that profile. Could be the next huge star in Brazil, which is what UFC continually needs. I mean, they have 3 Brazilian champions now, but to have a fourth and have it be a guy like that, I think would definitely go over big for them.
Yeah, but out of the three, I mean, I want to see all three of those fights, obviously.
Yeah.
But the one fight that I would not want to miss is the Gaethje Khabib fight.
I think you're probably right. You can't go wrong on any of them, and I think they'll all deliver. They're all intensely competitive. So lots to look forward to. Obviously, the UFC is mapping out its calendar through October now. And the schedule seems to be locked in, where you can trust the date, right? You can say, like, this is going to happen. It looks like that's locked in. We don't know the location for that fight, but certainly the UFC and now Bellator. I thought Bellator's return overall was pretty good. You said you watched the main event. The look of it was solid. I think that their location, their platform, everything in Mohegan, sharing that venue with Showtime is a good idea. So the fights keep churning out. The sports world attention is a little bit more diversified now, Jeff. So I don't know if the platform that the UFC sort of crafted for itself will hold. Will people still watch now that there's other things to watch? We'll see. But lots to pay attention, look forward to. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week. You're doing all right? Everything's good?
Yeah, everything's good.
All right.
Everything's good.
All right, great. For Jeff Sherwood, I am Josh Gross. You have been watching The Outsiders. Thank you so much.